I am thrilled to speak with you about some psychology that is relevant for your success as a student in this class, as well as your other classes, perhaps even in other areas of life. The content we discuss should be very relevant to you no matter uh, what you decide to do, because we're going to talk about time management, coping with stress, as well as memory and some things that psychology students tend to really enjoy and probably should study first thing during. In order to progress to these higher abilities and Bloom's taxonomy, you really have to devote adequate time to your studies. In this class will progress from remembering and understanding to applying. The questions I write on the exam will involve application, and then our essay that we write for the class will start to go to these higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy where you're evaluating and weighing the evidence for various positions. This ability to evaluate and create ultimately is what is valued when someone is taking a psychology class. They can say that they can think critically. I mean, it's valued by employers, psychology students, psychology majors are hired because of this ability to evaluate different positions and weigh the merits and the evidence for various positions. And so this is an ultimate goal for our class to be able to think critically. And you need to make sure that you're allotting sufficient time. One of the things I like to show my students, and hopefully this is beneficial for you, is Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants of time management. He says that, of course, you need to devote time here to quadrant 1 and take care of the crises in your life, but he makes the assertion that highly effective people and those who are most successful have a way of then devoting their time to quadrant 2, which is which involves activities that are important but not urgent, taking care of crises before they become crises. I was at a financial planning seminar recently, and someone made the assertion that if you budget enough money for emergencies, you don't have emergencies. Oh, the car broke down. Oh, here's the money for that. Oh, there's hospital bills to pay. Well, here's the money for that. And you're not going crazy with these crises that are going on in your life. And so there's some real wisdom and real logic to try to devote as much time as possible to this quadrant of time management where it's important but not urgent and dealing with it before it becomes urgent. So, right now, I want you to consider the question, what is important but not urgent for you? Now, Stephen Covey puts exercise in this category, and I totally put exercise there as well. That's an important but not urgent activity. And if you neglect your body, and you'll have some health issues where it becomes more of a crisis. Consider what it is for you. Maybe it's doing artwork or music or some recreational activities as are described in this box here. But maybe it's something else. Maybe it's getting a planner for the semester and organizing your time and writing down every exam and every due date. Um, do those things as much as possible because then you spend less time in quadrant 1. People who spend more time in quadrant 1 and have a lot of crises in their life tend to then be so exhausted that they have to do things like watch Netflix for a few hours and they'll not talk to anyone because they just want to turn off their brains and unplug. And if you can minimize quadrant 1, quadrant 4 tends to go down as well. You're rejuvenated by the things that you're doing in quadrant 2. You find them to be rewarding and more fulfilling, and they're more enjoyable. You also need to find a way of minimizing your distractions. There are things that are urgent but not important. So I find that notifications have that characteristic, and you need to find ways of turning off notifications on your phone. What works for me is turning them off in the apps. I've disabled all of my Facebook or Instagram or social media notifications, and I just get that information when I desire it, and it helps me to more effectively use my time. Um, so I have a do not disturb feature, for example, on my phone, which works well for me. It allows only my contacts my friends, actually my favorites contacts, my wife and family to come through during that time. And it's programmed to go on and off at certain times. And so there are plenty of apps, plenty of things that you can do. but you definitely should be thinking about ways of minimizing things in your life that seem urgent and are interrupting, but they're not necessarily important. So this for me, I think is has been a beneficial thing. I hope it helps you. I think you should consider this question about what's important for you and not urgent as you go out your life. And also try to make those decisions about importance in advance. So that's what time management is. It's a matter of prioritizing those things you value, those things you care about. So the night before your day, it does really make a lot of sense to write down those things you would like to accomplish the following day and to put it in a place that's visible in a calendar or something like that. Because when you're living your life and something emerges, you have to constantly evaluate the relative importance of different things for you. Do I want to do that? Do I care about that? Is that important to me? And you spend a lot of time, based on the research and based on some studies I've seen, where you actually spend a lot of psychological energy deciding what to do. But if you decide in advance what's important to you, you are much more precise with the use of your time and much more productive. So consider that and definitely get some planners or whatever it takes at the beginning of the semester to organize your life. Now, this applies perhaps to some of you that are new college students, but these are things to consider for all of us. Okay, there's two things I want to share with you about time management. Number one, my dad told me this lesson when I was a kid, and it's a great example. We were chopping down a tree, and he said, "Son, let me sharpen the saw with you." And the way he said it was a little strange. I could tell he was wanting to teach me some kind of lesson. We went to the garage and we sharpened the saw. We took a few minutes. I think he drank a sip of water or something like that. And then we went back to chopping down the tree, and we were so much more effective. And I could tell he was really trying to teach me something meaningful about life. And so, quadrant two activities recharge us and rejuvenate us. And one of the things I want you to think about and to do is to stagger your time with your studying. So only do it for a little bit and then do something else. So um, I'm going to invite you to study for this class 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day is so much more effective than, let's say, 3.5 hours on Saturday. Because, like fishing, a lot of people say, "Oh, I've been fishing for 3 hours and I haven't caught anything." Well, have you really been fishing for 3 hours? Because what I see when you're fishing for 3 hours is you uh, putting on a lure and rowing to where you want to cast, and you get stuck in the weeds. And so, how long is your fishing pole really in the water? So, if you study for 3.5 hours, I'll tell you that it's not really 3.5 hours. It's more like an hour and a half because there's some warm up time. Where the heck is my notebook? What was I thinking about the last time we looked at psychology? So think about that as you budget and manage your time, that you need to break up your study sessions. There's really good research on distributed learning. So um, Herman Ebbinghaus here since the 1800s, and his research on nonsense syllables, he was his own test subject, clearly shows it takes you more than twice as long to memorize or master twice as much material. So if it took you an hour to memorize and study 1 page of information, how long would it take to memorize and study and master 2 pages of information? Well, you think it would be an hour, but that's not the case. It's 3 hours or 4 hours because your memory has a limited capacity. It can only maintain 7 plus or minus 2, so 5 to 9 unique pieces of information in short-term memory at one time before it starts to decay or requires some kind of processing and encoding to be into long-term storage for more than the length of short-term memory. Anyway, this research is really clear. You need to break up your study sessions. You can only consume so much information in your mind at once. I like to think of memory as a muscle. So, in this regard, frequency is so much more important than intensity. You don't want to work out once a week. You don't want to work out right before something, for an intense workout. You want to do it more frequently. Otherwise, your muscles aren't going to recover and aren't going to really maintain the growth and development that constitutes the development of muscles. So, um, frequency is more important than intensity when it comes to working out. That is the case when it comes to your memory as well. Memory is like a muscle in that regard, and it's more of an ability that can be developed or a skill. It's not something necessarily that we're born with. This is a image here from a memory champion, how they memorize cards in memory competitions. Now, I want to share this with you because this conveys the point that you can develop skills. This person was a journalist. They didn't have a photographic memory. That's a bit of a myth that there you have can have a photographic memory. It's really something that you can develop. And the ancient Greeks knew this. They did this really well with mnemonic devices and would use it to show prodigious memory abilities, but it was because they had developed skills with hours of practice and devotion. So this person was a journalist, spent hours and hours and years training for the memory competitions, and he was able to compete and actually won the memory contest here in some of these competitions. So the way they do this in these competitions, they memorize a deck of cards in order. They give you a random assortment of a deck of cards. You get to fly through it, and the world record is 23 seconds, where a person can fly through this deck of cards and memorize the cards in order. And then what they have to do is they kind of close their eyes after they've looked at them, and so they have 5 minutes to organize another deck of cards to match the first deck. And they look at these cards. So the one person here um, makes it vivid and personal and unusual. That's the key. And that's the key when you're memorizing information. Make it vivid, unusual, bizarre. So for him, the ace of spades is Arnold Schwarzenegger lifting a barbell. The queen of clubs here, as you can kind of see it in the lower left corner, is Paris Hilton dancing on the dance floor. So each card has a person, an action, and an object. The nine of spades is his friend Dallin driving his car. So when he sees a triad of cards, the ace of spades, queen of clubs, and nine of spades, he sees them in order. He sees Arnold, and then Arnold starts dancing around the car. And so there's a method of loci where Arnold dancing around a car is placed in a location that this person goes through in their mind in sequence. Um, these skills can be developed, and that's the point I'm trying to make here. But you want your memory, the things that you encode into your memory, to be vivid, to be personal, to be unusual. So um, I like to ask my students, what is the memory structure associated with short-term memory in the brain? And it's the hippocampus. And I tell students to imagine if you saw a hippo on campus and imagine the emotions and the bizarre, the vivid images that would conjure up in your mind as you think of a hippo on campus. And you're now going to remember, because that is such a vivid and emotional and strange thing, that the hippocampus has to do with memory. So you can apply those techniques to your own study. Don't use the flashcards that are available online. Make your own and draw pictures and color them and make them vivid and personal and relevant in that regard. So that's just a few things about memory. So we've discussed time management a little bit. We've discussed memory. And then lastly, I'd like to share a few things with you at the beginning of the semester that have to do with coping with stress and flourishing, because ultimately managing stress is perhaps partly due to handling it before it becomes stressful, and that's perhaps the most important with time management, and then devoting adequate time to things. So if you fail to plan, you should plan to fail.